This is it, episode 50 of We're Only in It for the Music, and the fifth installment in the Mysterious Way series, and maybe the most elusive episode yet. This time, no classic from the previous century, but a modern track that sounds like it came from there. The first time I heard this song, I genuinely thought it was a lost track by Don Henley. That turned out to be completely wrong, but the feeling? That was absolutely right, because some songs do something without you immediately understanding what it is. And that's exactly where the story of Under the Pressure by the War on Drugs begins. In 2014, we're fully living in the age of streaming. Almost any song is available within seconds. A luxury, but also a trap. Because if a track doesn't grab us within 5 seconds, with a hook, a chorus, something, we move on, straight to the next one, and slowly music starts to turn into wallpaper. Something that drifts past us, instead of something we truly listen to. And then there's the war on drugs. Who couldn't care less about any of that? Because Under the Pressure takes its time, a full 9 minutes, to build, to grow. And after the peak, it slowly dissolves into echo and reverb. On paper, not exactly a hit formula, and yet, for many people, this was their first introduction to the band. More than that, it became their breakthrough. So the question is, how can a song that does everything wrong be so irresistible? Let's start with the basics, because when you break down Under the Pressure, this song does almost everything you're not supposed to do. No immediate hook, no chorus you instantly recognize, no clear structure to hold on to. Instead, a long, almost slow build. Layers that gradually stack. A groove that suggests more than it states. And only well past the halfway point does it feel like the song truly opens up. On paper, that's a disaster. Especially in an era where we decide within 5 seconds whether we stay or skip. And yet, it works. More than that, it's exactly that slow, almost stubborn pacing that makes the song so addictive. Because instead of giving you something, the song pulls you toward something. And that's a fundamental difference. This isn't a song building toward a chorus. It's a song building toward a feeling. And maybe that's exactly why this track hit me the way it did. Because truth be told, the war on drugs hadn't convinced me up to that point. Then again, that might also have something to do with the fact that I hadn't even heard of them before. 3 albums came before this. I went back and listened to all of them. But it simply didn't click, and that matters. Because this isn't the story of someone who loved everything a band ever did. This is the moment where it suddenly works. As if something shifts. As if a band finds its own sound. And with Under the Pressure, you can hear that immediately. Not as something entirely new, but as a kind of musical convergence. The first time I heard it, I thought of Don Henley. But there's more in there, the phrasing of Tom Petty, the vastness of Bob Dylan. And musically, to me, it feels like a cross between Roxy Music and Neil Young. British art rock meets American heartland rock. And somewhere in between, something unique takes shape, something this band hadn't fully found before. And that's no coincidence, because around this time, something changes within the band. With the departure of Kurt Weill, the musical dynamic shifts. And what remains is a sound that doesn't just feel different, but clearer. More focused, more consistent. You see it all the time. Bands that truly land only after leaving something behind. Think of Kings of Leon, where the early raw sound eventually gives way to something bigger, more accessible, and more successful. And something similar happens with the War on Drugs from their 4th album, Lost in the Dream. Only not by becoming simpler, but by finally knowing exactly what they want to be. The War on Drugs isn't a band that changes to achieve success. It's a band that finally understands what it is and who they meant to be. Let's zoom in on what's happening musically, because the key to Under the Pressure isn't in a chorus, but that doesn't mean there's no hook. Quite the opposite. It's hidden in something much more subtle. That piano line, that little motif that keeps coming back, simple, repetitive, almost casually placed. But precisely because of that, it sticks. Not because it demands attention, but because it's just always there. And underneath, that groove keeps moving. Tight, almost mechanical drums. No big variation, no obvious fills, just constant motion, as if the song is being pushed forward, without ever really speeding up. And on top of that, the layers begin to stack. Synths that linger. Guitars that don't so much play riffs, but add texture. Expanding, drifting guitar layers. Everything repeats. Subtly. Almost imperceptibly. And that's exactly the point. Because where a traditional song grabs your attention through contrast, this song does the opposite. It slowly pulls you in, and before you realize it, that piano motif is already stuck in your head. This isn't a song that begins. It's a song you fall into halfway through. And then there's the vocal. Because here, too, Under the Pressure does something remarkable. If you listen closely, there's barely such a thing as a traditional chorus. The chorus lyric hardly goes beyond the title itself. Under the Pressure. And that's about it. No fully developed hook line. No big lyrical payoff. And yet, it feels like a chorus. But that's not because of what's being said. It's because of how it feels. The vocal delivery of Adam Grandusel sits somewhere between speaking and singing, as if he's searching for the right words, while the music keeps moving forward. And because of that, that one line gains weight, not as a message, but as a state of being. Under the Pressure isn't a chorus, it's a feeling that keeps returning. And that feeling builds. Because where the song starts off restrained, the vocal gradually becomes more intense, more urgent, more charged, until everything begins to open up. First, musically, in the bridge, with more space, more reverb, more air, as if the song briefly breaks free from that constant forward motion, a kind of in-between space, and then the release, where everything converges, the groove, the layers, the repetition, and that one line, now fully charged. This isn't about a story with a beginning and an end. It's about the feeling of being stuck inside something. And when you listen to the lyrics, it only becomes more interesting, because this isn't a story that's neatly told. It's fragments, moments, thoughts that surface, and then fade again. Standing in the wake of our pain, we stare straight into nothing. These aren't concrete scenes, they're mental states. And that one line, Under the Pressure, keeps returning, but not as a conclusion, more as an observation. This is where we are, not where we're going, not something that gets resolved, but something you're in the middle of, and something you're trying not to collapse under. Wading in the water, just trying not to crack. That's not poetry to be dissected. That's someone trying to hold themselves together. And somewhere, you can feel it. This is about more than just a single moment. It's about being stuck between what was and what's still to come. Better come around to the new way, or watch as it all breaks down. As if change is inevitable, but never really comfortable. And maybe that's why the song feels so dreamlike. Almost like a haze, not entirely real. Like an illusion, but also not something you can step out of. And that's where the duality lies. Because despite that tension, that pressure, there's also something comforting in it. As if the music itself becomes a kind of anchor, not by giving answers, but by carrying you through it. And you can hear that in the way the vocal is delivered. The voice of Adam Grandusel floats over the music, sometimes clear, sometimes almost drowning in the mix, as if the words matter less than the feeling they carry. And meanwhile, the structure of the song slowly begins to shift. What initially feels like a verse-chorus form starts to dissolve. More space emerges, more reverb, more distance, as if the song briefly detaches from itself, a kind of bridge, but without a clear transition. And right there is where the tension peaks. And maybe that's exactly why the song lingers, because it doesn't try to resolve anything. It doesn't give you a clear chorus, no neatly wrapped up story. It simply lets you sit inside it. And that's precisely what makes the release at the end so powerful. Because when everything finally opens up, it doesn't feel like a climax that was announced in advance, but like something you've been slowly pulled into, like an undercurrent in the sea. And when I saw The War on Drugs live, around the release of A Deeper Understanding, that only became clearer. Under the Pressure was stretched out even further. And in the bridge, suddenly, a baritone saxophone came in, more upfront than on the studio cut. That deep, warm tone gave the song even more space, even more weight. And in that moment, everything came together. That was the peak of the concert. Not because it was the loudest song or the biggest, but because everything that song does fully came into its own right there. And maybe that says something about the album it comes from. Lost in the Dream doesn't sound like a snapshot in time. It sounds timeless, like something you can return to again and again and hear something new each time. And even the way this song found its audience is telling, because while other tracks from the album circulated as promo singles, Under the Pressure was only released as a shortened 4-minute version. That's the version that made it to the radio, and the one I heard first, thinking I was listening to a forgotten track by Don Henley. But the album version takes its time, and maybe that's the core of it all. That a song which doesn't really hold on to anything is exactly the kind of song that stays with you. Under the Pressure is where we are. That was episode 50. That was The War on Drugs. That was Under the Pressure. That was Mysterious Ways. What do you think of The War on Drugs? And what do you think of Under the Pressure? Let me know in the comments and vote in the poll. If you want to listen to this song again, check out the Spotify playlist with all the music from this series. And visit the socials for all updates. Because I will follow you, if you follow me. And if you, like me, once thought you were listening to Don Henley, check out this episode on the Boys of Summer. Click and check that one out. Thanks for watching. See you next time. And in the meantime, drop the needle, press play, and remember, we're only in it for the music.